We are coming up on our 7th month with this task force. Believe it or not, this is actually our 8th meeting. So thank you all for hanging in there. It's been interesting, challenging ride, but we're definitely making some great strides here. By our next, it may be our last meeting, it may not be, but at our next meeting, which should be November 15th, we'll have our draft recommendations for you all to review. So we're going to use today to kind of just go over some issues, some final issues, and get some more opinions, right?
We actually have some language today that we want you to read and make sure we're all moving in the same direction. So we hope that we're going to be writing furiously. So ideally the mid-November we'll have something to look at, but realistically we're looking at things like budget numbers we were talking about before the meeting for some areas. So it may take a little bit extra time. So we'll see how the timeline progresses.
Just a quick reminder that this meeting is subject to the Brown Act, so it is open to the public, and we'll have a few minutes at the end of the meeting to have the public respond to any questions. Okay, with that, let's do introductions. I'm Richard Franco with Adult Protective Services, WDAX. Parking ticket right over here on the side, so I'm not sure. If you're missing a ticket, it's right here, okay?
Thank you.
No worries. Any questions before we come back? Oh, sure. Sure it's it? Okay. Okay, great.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and get started. This will be, I really want people to feel comfortable to kind of weigh in. We're getting towards the end of the timeline, and we're kind of setting some structure as to what is it that we as a task force can recommend. Our goal is to turn in our report so that in December that the board would have sort of our collective thoughts about what to do next, what's the next steps. And I have to say it's a big task. We have a broad population that we're concerned about, many different conditions, and then I've showed you a conceptual model where we've really thought about there's sort of stages of this work as well. We want to protect people from ever going wandering. We also want to be sure that if they go missing that we're on the spot, we have as much technology and all the wonderful LA County resources there to find them as quickly as possible. And then if they end up in the system somewhere as an unidentified missing person, we want to be able to have the technology and the training to be able to identify them. So it's just, I feel like it's a multifaceted, large initiative that we have before us. But I want to thank you all. As I look around the table, I've had a lot of wonderful one-to-one conversations with you, and feel like there's lots of threads that we've been able to bring together. So I want to start by looking at this document. It's got the seal on the front. This is a narrative, and it's always hard. We could wordsmith as a group, and that wouldn't go very far. But I think that as you kind of read through this, I would love for you to feel free to make any changes or issues that you feel that don't fit. But I do want to take time in the meeting to review what here is the policy for adoption, to start thinking about kind of overarching, what is it that we want to ask for. And so this document would be sort of, it's the draft of our report that we're starting now. And so it takes, people through who's been here, who is in the motion. It kind of gets people oriented to the issue. This idea of the scope of wandering and missing incidents. Oh yes, Fernando.
Yeah, may I make a recommendation for change on page 506 on the consortium membership? It should be, instead of Office of the Public Guardian, it should be Department of Mental Health, or just one section of the Department of Mental Health.
Got it. Okay. Department of Mental Health.
Part of that issue is that on the motion,
yeah,
your program is listed separate of mental health, but we can make the change. We can
take that under advisement. Can we add both?
I would add both.
Yeah. Can we just add that in front of it?
I'm
and
just
then,
saying, it's just one section, so it's colleague here. Yeah, I don't want him to be felt excluded.
The way that you have it listed, Department of Mental Health is not listed at all, so you could either list both if you want, or you could put Department of Mental Health and put in parentheses, you know, so it's, as long as you're inclusive, I think it would be great.
Perfect, perfect, okay. So this idea of the policy is kind of thinking about this idea of what are we going to ask for. So I have a little bit here about defining, we've learned that, you know, we're focused on the at-risk missing persons, and that's really fit for our huge umbrella of folks that we're concerned about, from children to adults, different conditions, developmental, as well as cognitive decline, and all the range of issues there. I made a comment about conditions that were diagnosed versus those that haven't been diagnosed. I think there's a lot of folks that are coping with caregiving and don't really know exactly what that condition is, but know that the person needs a lot of support. So this first paragraph, if there's anything here that this idea of an interprofessional approach, the idea of, I think it has taken a very multidisciplinary approach just to do this task force. Would you agree? Kind of bringing together the different commissions, the different expertise around the table. So moving from this section then to the idea of having an actual group continue the work. So I did find in the literature there is an international consortium on wandering and missing incidents. And I felt like that title is very inclusive, and it also is more accurate in the sense of the idea of not just those that wander, but really anybody that goes missing that needs help, right? So you might be out at an event or something like that where this happens. So think about the title of that, what you think, and then as you read through here, I think where we left off last meeting was, what do we want this group to do? So we wrap up, we have maybe 1 or 2 more meetings, and then the board will be voting about having an ongoing or maybe a 1-year extension of this work. How would we want to frame that? And so I took a stab at that, basically thinking about the role of that. So let's see, I'm on 5 of 6. Towards the top, it talks about the role of the consortium to plan, and I thought of community organizing, you know, thinking of planning, implementing, managing, and monitoring collaborative projects, those that are feasible, significant, and efficient, so that we would be good, you know, stewards of the resources. That we would bring content experts together that could help also in very difficult investigations. So I know Azita was a very good advocate last meeting to say, you know, I want to be sure that we actually do some of the helping with cases, you know, and being sure that we're available to weigh in. And some of us reflected on the forensic center model that some of us are really familiar with. So thinking about, you know, kind of the role of that. And so I'm curious, any thoughts that are resonating for you? I don't know if we would see this as more administrative, where it would be maybe a quarterly meeting, versus something that would be much more frequent. Maybe it would be twice a month or monthly, and there would actually be, you know, I need help with this case. Now that I feel so comfortable with you, I can tell you this, you know, can you help me? Those are 2 different kinds of groups. So what are your thoughts about those, kind of on the continuum of how this ongoing body would work?
Is LAPD on this list?
They were not originally in the motion either.
So if you're proposing membership for a continuing consortium, though, we certainly wouldn't want to limit ourselves to just who was in the motion, and they would have to be there.
Right. I kind of basically used that as sort of, we would definitely mandate who had to be there, and then, you know, basically we would need all the players
there.
We're going to meet.
So in that vein, though, I mean, wouldn't we want Santa Monica and Torrance, and I don't know what the other, I can't list the biggest cities in LA, but there's Culver City, I guess, right? There's probably 4 major cities, right? Which we haven't asked them to come yet, but that might be advantageous as well. I don't know. Maybe that just gets in the way. I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that there's an association of police chiefs. I would think that we would want a representative from that group, because they would at least be able to funnel information
Right.
to all of the other local peace officers.
Mark Delgado's not here today, but he's on that commission with the police chiefs. So he was very helpful when we wanted to survey everybody. He got that out to 46 entities.
It's valuable to have Detective Soto here, right, with the real life experience of looking for missing people as well, that type of experience as well.
Yeah. How could we do that? I know, so we've got to balance people's time with, I think if we met less frequently, I could see them getting there. But I think, I look at you, Detective Soto, because I think it's tough to come to these, isn't it?
It is, but of course, it's important work, obviously. It also allows me to touch base with Mr. Moody, which, I certainly appreciate knowing his reasons for being here. So we, of course, and again, I'm a representative of our department, so of course, anything that, can be identified that could potentially improve or help or assist in any way, absolutely will be attentive to.
Yeah. So I guess that would be the greatest, the modeling of that amongst other police departments and police agencies.
I think if the board supports this development of a commission that is over this, and that is out in the public, that if they ever need help or they're struggling, they could contact a point person. That point person or that commission could continue on, and if you met quarterly, then if there were big issues that they've compiled, that would allow the professionals to come in quarterly and to address any missing pieces that they've collected during that, lapse between the quarter. But I think it is important on a case-by-case, like, with Mr. Moody and his wife and stuff, for just the public to feel like there's someone they could talk to that would have a greater interest in this and could shoot out the information to all the parts rather than trying to figure out the parts as a person. I'm thinking almost like an ombudsman kind of role, where there is this point person at LA County that everybody knows they can go to. Does that make sense?
We have the ombudsman here. When you think about the sheer magnitude of our county, I'm just thinking if we can be sort of the train the trainers, it's sort of a model that's coming to my mind, that the care managers, other folks that are doing a lot of the services begin to know some of the things we've learned. I'm hoping some of that also would be part of this group, is to get information out, disseminated, people trained. But so I'm just thinking, in the casework, that I'm sure it's very time sensitive. Obviously, this would not be a body that could deal with something that comes up so time sensitive, right?
So maybe you want to revise your statement to include communication, because what you have is implement, manage, monitor, and communicate. Another thought that I had is that it is difficult to plan everything ahead of time. For the group to meet and to think through, see the function, what are the needs, and further define the role might be something that you want to consider. In terms of time, usually groups tend to meet more at the beginning as they're forming. Once they have defined roles and responsibilities, then you can decide, maybe meet as a subcommittee on specific issues. So you can plan it all.
And I think a lot of times too, it's different players, somebody kind of pulls off and somebody comes new, and so it is pretty dynamic, isn't it?
Yes.
This,
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
This might be in here, I just skimmed it, but it seems like there should be, perhaps, and maybe it is, one other thing that is, that talks about the emergency-ness of this. So if we have ongoing meetings, which I think would be a great idea and more important, because new technologies and stuff will come up and people will think of new things, and that's wonderful. But in the time that it happens, 1,000 people could go missing. Mr. Moody's wife went missing, so if there could be something to help, get, like on an emergency level, some easy way to get something in place that will be able to get people home that doesn't cost much, as a priority. So that while the political stuff goes on and the meetings go on and stuff, there's something.
Yeah. When you said political, I'm sorry, I cable cards. Because I think it is a big moving, slow moving sometimes kind of an initiative.
I know the way the Forensic Center works, and there's a few of us who are involved. So it does meet like on a quarterly basis, but when
weekly.
Well, there is another group of us that meet on it's a larger group where we bring in presenters, but when there's an incident that happens, they know to reach specific contact people from various agencies. So, and I just got one this week from them. And then we all provide our connections, our resources. So it's kind of an ongoing basis, but we know we can always meet when we have our set meetings. And each of us takes our own project that relates to the focus.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
If you're thinking about in terms of this being sort of modeling after other teams, maybe kind of like elder death review, where it's
I'm very familiar with the name.
Where it's not necessarily, people can go to present a case, but we also learn from what went wrong
Yes.
along the way, and it's a really safe place to learn what went wrong and how we could self-correct, or who has ideas about, what could be done next. But then there would have to be, I know for elders, there's the confidentiality, the Welfare Institutions Code that allows for sharing of information. I don't know if there's something similar for children, and the team, the team would be looking at all age ranges potentially, right? So,
we're okay HIPAA-wise.
So we'd have to figure. Yeah. So I don't know about any of the constraints related to working with kids. But
I think under any structure, we need to identify a point agency or person that would address urgent cases and disseminate the information. That needs to be part of the overall protocol. The group meeting quarterly to share information is good, but what we need to address is what happens when someone goes missing within the first couple of hours and how we coordinate that.
So that's sort of addressed under the technology strategies that under C, community activation alert systems. So we don't, I guess there's not a specific recommendation at this point, but I think that's what that leads to, right? That was the intent of that?
Right. I mean, and again, sort of in my model, thinking about, sort of a group that carries forward this as a key thing on its own. I think all of us are dealing with these issues in our work in different ways, whether we're training and responding and investigating or coming upon cases that involve this. But I think the idea of really resonating together to get that synergistic kind of expertise together, and I think to be more proactive and to protect. So, and so I kind of was trying to balance that idea in my mind of how often would be, enough, but not burdening people, because you have a lot of priorities, in your work. So I think of elder abuse, I'm looking at you, and this is sort of an interesting overlay of some of the work that you do as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Forensic Center model is great, and it can deal with issues that arise relatively quickly. But we meet every week, and everyone commits to going every single week.
Yeah.
I think training is a huge portion of what needs to happen. I think there needs to be specifically the training for autistic kids and spectrum kids, and how those are going to look to first responders.
And as they age, too.
Right, and as they age. And so, we are implementing in the DA's office what we call briefing trainings, where we go out at, briefing roll call training. So whenever they start their shift, if they start their shift at 6 a.m., then we are there at 6 a.m. and we're giving them about 20 minutes of really quick stuff of this is when you're doing an elder physical investigation, an elder financial investigation, a galactic investigation. This is what we need you to do. We're also going to the Detective Bureau because that's a different investigation than what we're expecting our first responder patrol to do. I suggest it should be a similar situation where people go into law enforcement in a briefing roll call capacity to make sure that you're getting all training to all the levels of the different officers, particularly first responders that are out there. They need to know, those patrol guys need to know what to look for and what to do. And they're the ones that need the training. So I think training is a huge component that you guys need.
That's great. Lourdes?
And on the other side of that, the public needs to be informed as to what they need to provide first responders. Because I think a lot of times we as the public are not informed. So a lot of the frustration, then who do we go to? We go to our Board of Supervisors because we think that's the only person that's going to hear us, because we're not connecting to all these different networks and departments. So the importance of the consortium and being a place where individuals can come and kind of get that. But the consortium also developing the information and the network that's going to go out to the public and community would also be important, I think.
I think the 4 strategies that we've been using at the task force here had the community outreach as one of them. And I think those could be at least a good starting place for this group to work with those 4 strategies. So I would think that would be a big piece, is the community outreach. And there's a lot of existing, we have the departments here that have a lot of existing people that are in the community. I'm thinking about the contracted like case management and adult protective services and different.
And the reason I'm insisting on that is because in the community there's still a lot of fear for reporting, because then it's reported as neglect. So that's a very valid thing we need to look at.
Yeah, and I think, working with the regional center system as far as the autistic clients go and the children, that would be a wonderful place to sort of bring it together, and you'd have access to these families that may not otherwise advocate for themselves or really know what to do or just be coping. They're just coping day after day trying to chase their child around. Whereas if they're a client of Regional Center, you could have materials, or perhaps there could be trainings at Regional Center. Yes, for the families, yeah.
And you've been able to reach across the different regional centers a little bit about this?
A little bit, but not as much as I would have liked to at this point.
So part of this ongoing consortium, I'm thinking we could hold some organizations more accountable or collect good data. There's so many good trainings that are mandated right now that are going on. I find them hard to kind of get a handle on because there's mandated training, and then the content within the training. I think that would be a wonderful, thing to study a little bit, because I think some are much higher quality than others. Looking into post-training at the Department of Justice, for example, I noticed there was very little on dementia. It wasn't of the same caliber as the developmental kinds of disorders. So it's like, could we as a group have enough influence and power to ask that be rewritten or revised, So there's a lot of different things. So I was just thinking, as a group, if we're getting together to kind of keep the ball going, find some sort of benchmark, things that we can start collecting information as we go, so that we have more power around the issue.
Just heard you say something that perhaps we need to incorporate in this statement, and that's the evaluation piece.
Evolution?
Evaluation.
Oh, evaluation, yeah. Yeah.
That would close.
That's the last piece, yeah. And I sort of hesitated, just thinking, will the group have enough input, will they have enough energy for that? But I think it's so critical,
Well,
isn't
many
it?
times, you don't need to do it yourself. You can actually have partners in academia that will be responsible for taking care of that aspect. But I think if you're going to be engaged in all this, you need to evaluate your effort. It needs to be done some way.
It's the only way to know if you're making progress. It's sort of the data thing I'm talking about, right?
But you relate to what Molly was saying at the Forensic Center. It gives you an opportunity to see what worked, what didn't work, and what didn't work, why didn't it work, and how could we, plug in those issues.
So it's sort of the trends, and then it's the learning from the actual activity.
I'd like to follow up on what Bazita talked about last time, though, in terms of some sort of centralized clearinghouse, because if we're going to have some sort of policy that we're seeing potentially some funds can go to that implementation, it's not just figuring out what the problems were and how we can make it better, but how do we start coordinating the communication across all these various agencies.
Yes, I was going to actually, I was listening.
I could tell it was either Ray or the Pat.
There's restraining
Let's hear it, please.
advocate. So is the consortium in addition to the recommendation that I specifically have made to create a body that is a function of one of the departments that acts somewhat like an ombudsman that connects all of the first responders within the county with the dire information that they are not currently getting because each police department or each agency's protocol timing is different, and there is not currently the capacity of communication between Glendale Police Department versus the fire in Eagle Rock versus so there still needs to be this one body, and it could be this pilot project that starts off with just 2 or 3 staff members. It does need to be 24 hours because, as we talked about, people don't go missing 9 to 5, they go missing 24 hours a day. So it has to be like a 911 operator that will get the information from the first responders. So it's not the caregiver who's calling this number. It's whichever agency is leading the investigation needs to call this number and say, this is what we know so far, this is how far we're into the investigation, please share this amount of information that is really just descriptive as far as the person, the event, the timing, and that's what I see as crucially missing. But the consortium piece is important to check in to see, do they have the support? Is this something that is working well? The number of missing that we have currently in LA County is so high. Are we able to facilitate that need? So
you're saying that
thank you for opening the floodgates.
That's the part that would be so crucial. Like, for instance, we had a person missing yesterday, we have one missing today. And of course, we contact our local police, but that person may not stay within our local area, and whether or not that information gets disseminated to a broad enough net, that's a concern for us.
But don't you feel like so little devil's advocate, I mean, if we could get all the entities to function the way the law is mandating them, people should get into the database within 2 hours, right? I mean, they have to put it in the CLEAT system, right? And I know that's
missing
tough.
an unidentified person system.
Yeah.
Which is also linked to the national system as well.
But that's been difficult, right? You were educating me that it's not always at the priority of what's going on the ground.
That's only law enforcement's requirement, though, correct?
But it's required within 2 hours, right? So I think some law enforcement understand and are working towards that, right?
Yes.
And so I guess as I've learned more about it, I was thinking that there's a lot of infrastructure that just doesn't get used,
That's right.
And I just feel like to make more infrastructure, it just feels like quicksand. Whereas if we could use some of the structure that's there.
Yeah, but if I was in Mr. Moody's shoes and we all know how frustrating we all are from so many different entities and so many different departments, and we all have our things within our departments, and the old silo term. And I don't know, if I was in his shoes, it would be so nice to have that number to call or something like that, where I'm not having to figure out all these different entities, but you've got someone there that knows all those different entities. I'm just thinking within our own department, we know, like, okay, I need help with mental health. Okay, so I'm going to call the mental health person that's co-located in our office that can link to that can link to this, or for my kiddos, or my adults, they know they can call our section. We become the experts in that.
Right.
And to have an expert in that can coordinate all these people and even just offer a kind word to that person
Like a
who's
care
just so
coordinator
overwhelmed.
For the family.
Yeah, for the family and for all our systems. And I just can't, the public, it's great. If they're children's services, we're going to take care of the kids. We're going to know to call law enforcement. We're going to push. We're going to have our sections doing it. But if I'm just regular Joe Schmo out in the public, it's overwhelming. I mean, you talked about your story, and I mean, to go through that, it's bad enough to be missing someone, but to have to deal with all these different entities to figure out who to connect, it's tough.
Well, going back to using the existing infrastructure, right? If we had a list of the people that would be contacted by the police, right? We give the police, here's a list of people that have to be contacted when somebody goes missing, right? And maybe it's a subscription service as opposed to the police have to pick up the phone and call everybody, or they have a broadcast email or something, I don't know, but there's an existing, because the police, they do contact a whole bunch of people as soon as the person goes missing, right? They contact they contact the sheriff's department, they contact the police departments of the fellow communities, they contact the local hospitals, so they're doing a lot of contacts. So they already have a set of that, right? So if we expanded that list, and then the police would hand that list to the person, to the caregiver, to say, these are all the people that have automatically been contacted.
That seems to be a
Right?
missing step right
That would
there.
be clearly that's a missing step right now, but that would be along your lines, but it doesn't create a whole new infrastructure, which I think, frankly, the board of supervisors is going to be pretty reluctant to do, right? Cost-wise and everything, right? Sort of a whole new office for. I'm just trying to be sort of pragmatic. I think that's kind of reaching for the stars to do something like that just for these cases.
I mean, it is reaching for the stars, but isn't it the ideal that we want to accomplish? Maybe not today, maybe not next year, but I'm with the Zeta on this one. I really think that there has to be a central agency in charge. And if that doesn't happen, then we need options. And what exactly are those options? We need to determine them, and we need to figure out now, because we've been talking about this for 7 months now, guys. We have to come up with some solutions here. So let's talk.
So is there a way to create some kind of an automated system that, because what we said was each system can't cross over to, so police can't talk to the fire department system, and mental health can't cross over to, city, LA County. So is there a way to create this automated system that it automatically makes calls to the key agency?
And we have Captain Pappas here too, who's educated us about something as well. So you want to start, Solomon?
No, about this coordination issue, I think that's the key problem and part of the reason for initiating this project or bringing our loved ones home task force by the board. When they noticed that there was no coordination, the lack of coordination, as in the example of Nancy told us, the problem was there are several agencies, law enforcement agencies in place, but however there was no coordination among all those several agencies, and frustration was already obvious. So that the task for this task force is to come up with a solution about what kind of infrastructure, organizational setup, or system would fill in that gap, the lack of coordination. So a central agency could be one idea. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a new agency, maybe designating an existing agency.
Yes.
And just to expand a little bit on that, we're talking of about 4 strategies. Training is one, coordination and policy is another one, outreach and community education is the third one, technology is the fourth one. So we may even have to think about leading agencies to lead those strategies, in addition to an overall leading agency. But this, in my view, wouldn't exclude the idea of the consortium or the forensic type approach. It would just reinforce and would make sure that the daily activities will be handled. So it's a question to discuss. Maybe you can suggest ways of developing that coordinating role. What kind of agency, what kind of system would fill in this gap?
You could even tag on for. I'm going into the community outreach section. Under the Department of Developmental Services website or regional center websites, there could be a tab for is your loved one missing or endangered, and there could be a number of resources there. Here's the procedure for what occurs when your loved one goes missing, because we have to get that information. There's a coordination between the agencies issue, which is huge, but there's also we can have the best running machine, but if people who go missing and their families don't have access to it, or that was sort of the whole central reason for this, right? The thesis of it. So something simple like that, because most people turn to their computers.
If they have a computer.
That's true. That's true.
But almost everybody's, at least in our experience, even people in poverty often have cell phones.
That's right.
And as long as the cell phone is a smartphone, they can access, like our website, for example, in order to get that kind of information.
I'm thinking of low impact. I'm thinking of something that would not cost the moon and would be easy to implement immediately.
And if that same message that's found on their website could be found in the Disabilities Commission and
it would all be standardized. It would be standardized.
It would be great because we're not giving different messages or different.
And that's something that could be implemented very quickly. Obviously, it has to jump through hoops for getting signed off on, but.
Yeah.
Why not I'm thinking way more low tech, but I'm thinking, why can't we just have the first responders out there provide a list? Everybody gets a written document that tells them what to do, what agencies to call, the phone numbers are on there. So if law enforcement had something that they could just give to people when they responded out to these calls, then that would give the caregivers have to, which website do I go to? Here you go. Here's the information, here's all the local contacts, here's our neighboring police departments' phone numbers. This is what you need to do. And law enforcement is staffed with that information. And then they give it when they go to the call.
But I don't think we're saying it's one or the other. I think it would be
no,
important
I'm
to
just
have
saying
both.
it's in a low-tech sort of way. If people to get this information, here you go. Here's what we're going to give to you, and create something that can be passed out.
How is this going through your mind?
So we have similar procedures in place already when it comes to calls of service from different topics. Domestic violence, one. There's probably 3 different pamphlets, handouts that are given during those types of calls. It's certainly not anything that our officers don't do already. However, a lot of missing persons are reported telephonically. So how you would necessarily pass them, it's something that we also have a lot of information posted on our website. So those are certainly referrals made. So that's one example of a hurdle with respect to passing along that information. But if something can be identified, absolutely, we'll do it.
I think a consortium that says, okay, is it on your website yet? Is it on your website? Like, oh, I don't see it there yet. Here it is. Oh, we need to update it. Here, everybody get it out. It's like just constant dynamic, right, to keep this information out there, getting it to the 46 different places that have the law enforcement. We have a lot of people that are in our county that haven't heard of our task force yet, that I just feel like there's just so much, to kind of get the word out and the education piece.
Did you see the film?
I haven't seen the film yet. I got the link.
It's pretty great.
And there's a podcast as well. There's been some wonderful.
There's a new film that's been produced, and it's really a well-done short. It's 12 minutes long on this task force. Well, on Kirk and Nancy, and my son is featured as well, who's a superstar of Disappearing Act.
Tracy Fox.
And Tracy Fox. So it's something that you can send out on social media, and it's a really great short. They did such a great job with it.
That would be great to look it over. I would like to go back to the point that Richard was making and tying it back to the motion of the board and the identification of the lack of coordination. I feel that if that role is trusted to the leading agency, at least at the beginning. That might be a solution. So that will require a staff person. I believe in streamlining procedures and self-management. So that might be something that this person might be able to guide and support. And the consortium do the monitoring piece and oversight. No need to reinvent, the wheel.
I wanted to go back, Captain Pappas, can you tell us a little bit about the database that because I know when you and I spoke, it sounded like this database would be really something that we could access and could be a big part of this. But then I got the sense that there's probably 30 of them, or it was getting a little bit tough.
So right now, I just want to tell you about a model that I think is excellent, which is Orange County. Orange County was an early adopter of an electronic patient care report record after the Affordable Care Act took place. Orange County had the foresight and the political will, because it takes political will to do this, to say that every single fire department, hospital, all the emergency medical records, the patient medical records, electronic records would be on one system provided by one company in this massive database, and everybody would be able to have access to it. So right now today in Orange County, every hospital, every responding agency, Anaheim, Orange County Fire, Fountain Valley, Huntington Beach, it's a massive database of all the patients they see. It is well coordinated, and there's access to it, and Orange County Sheriff has access to it, as well as the local police departments. It is a model that we should have used, but we didn't adopt in LA County. LA County was a late adopter of these electronic patient care records for their first responders, for a lot of reasons. LA County now, because they were a late responder, now all of these antitrust laws are in place. So it would take the political will of the Board of Supervisors to say what is advantageous. These antitrust laws that says you cannot have an entire county on one system, or what is better for the greater good. But I hope everyone understands it's going to take the political will of the county to say we will choose the greater good for our people, and we will try to find a way around these antitrust laws. I'm an advocate for a common database. It is successful. It is being done in counties all over California. But we have got to rally together our resources to get this done here. So imagine LA City sees 400,000 patients a year. We see LA County Fire sees 400,000. We have a massive database of patients we contact. In fact, Mr. Moody, we did send you a report. Mr. Moody contacted us for a report for his wife. Unfortunately, I don't think your wife was in our database, but we were able, within a matter of a day or two, send him a report of all of the missing persons we had contacted. And it's there, it's available, we just have to link it. Now, right now in LA County, there's probably upwards of 7 or 8 electronic patient care reports that are out there because of these antitrust laws.
That's less than I thought. That's good.
Yeah, the county has to collectively say, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm certainly not going to venture into this, but there has to be a way to have a common EMR, an electronic medical record system, like the Orange County model, where everything feeds into one system, so fire departments can find out where their patients went to and how the outcome is. We are behind the state of California in that. We are the county that is least developed in that area. However, ironically, we have the greatest population of missing patients, and we probably have the greatest need. So we have a system. If anybody needs to contact LA County Fire, you can. Police departments can. We might contact a patient that we found as a homeless patient, for instance, and we will write that patient up, put them in a database. I gave you the information. It's a very comprehensive report that we collect that's in the database that can be queried in a matter of minutes. And then we can even tell you where they were picked up, where they were treated, and what hospital they were brought to. So it really helps to narrow down if, for instance, one of your loved ones went missing, we can at least pinpoint where we found them and where we took them to. And then, but then you would have to go to that hospital, and then they would have to query their database as to what happened after we brought them in. But just a thought, it's something that I'm really passionate about, because I see it in other counties. We see it right next door to us. Actually, San Bernardino and Riverside are also. They got on board before the antitrust laws took effect, and their entire counties are integrated with this. And I think it's something we should look at. And again, I don't know the complications of traversing that road, but maybe this is the venue for it, and perhaps this is the consortium that can get that done. I don't know. But if you feel you have a loved one that went missing in a certain city, you can absolutely contact the local police or the sheriff, but try contacting that fire department to see if they have any medical records. And if you are the next of kin or spouse and the HIPAA laws don't apply, you'll be able to get the patient information. It's worth a shot, because we have to, by law, every single person who calls 911, if we get on scene and we treat them or evaluate them or touch them, by law, we must have an electronic patient care record for them. If you just called me because you're not feeling so good and you want a blood pressure check, I have to write a report on you. So this is a great opportunity to get a hold, to see if your loved one is in that database. So, but something to think about.
We did add it to, we had updated and kind of want to finalize the checklist for law enforcement, and we did put that in there. But Lieutenant Gannon, who's been very active on this task force without showing up, he's amazing. He's training today, so he couldn't be here, but he had asked me just last night, he said, you know, I need, like, how do we get to like those 7 or 8, like, is there a point person for each one of those or something? That I think just knowing that's there is a huge, you know, thing. And then through our checklist, if we could get this best practice out to all law enforcement so that most of them know that's available, and then they know how to access it. I mean, I think we would be inching forward even quite a bit. But the bigger fight, I think, would be the integration, which I think is so valuable.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on what was just mentioned on the electronic patient record. I think that from the hospital perspective, we would love to have a single one, because the challenge for the hospitals is when they have multiple jurisdictions that come into their facility, they have to build those interfaces to be able to connect and be able to exchange that information, and then to add more complexity to it is the formatting is different. So you have nursing staff that is used to tracking and reading a patient chart, a medical record in a certain way, but then you got a different product that has different information and layout is different. And so, you know, we would love to have a single one. It's less burdensome for the hospital because it's, you know, again, the interfaces that they have to build with each of these different products. I think I would have to echo that it's going to be a challenge, because you have some jurisdictions that have already purchased the product and it's already been deployed, and you know, to ask them, you know, hey, wait a minute, you have that, we want you to replace that with this, is going to be a challenge. But the other thing I wanted to just mention, I guess, on 2 technology strategies. Alert Alley County, I guess, is that the medical alert center that is operated by the
Office of Emergency Medicine Management.
Oh, the EMS agency?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But they actually
primarily for evacuations. Primarily for evacuations.
But when the SNAP program went away, I think they said that they would do this piece. They would take, it was kind of sent there, I believe, to be also to handle missing persons, isn't it?
I never heard that.
And it doesn't get dealt with that way.
So the Medical Alert Center can actually push out messaging out to the hospital, the emergency departments, be it to the readiness system. And the readiness system is a system that a lot of hospitals, just not just in Kern County, but in different counties in our state, that have adopted that. But that's, you know, at least in LA County, the Medical Alert Center is a venue where you can push messaging out to the facilities. not only our first responders, like fire departments are on it. I think some of the law enforcement agencies as well may be on it. I can't say for sure that every single one.
This is ReadyNet that you're talking about?
Yeah, ReadyNet.
ReadyNet.
But they get the messages through the Medical Alert Center.
The Medical Alert Center, what is the medical?
The MAC.
The MAC. Oh, the MAC, okay.
Yeah, which LA County EMS agencies.
But that doesn't mean specifically the medical alert, like we talk about you sign in and pay a fee for.
No. This is different. Yeah.
That is the system we utilize in LAPD as well.
ReadyNet. Yeah.
What's the limitations of ReadyNet? Because I think that's been
Well,
something we don't
from
know.
what we were told during one of these meetings is initially we were told by LA City Fire, I don't know if they're here, but that is a system that they utilize to identify available beds for patients. And that I believe it was the chief that brought it to our attention. He showed us the formatting. Number one, it doesn't include photos, which we know because when we send those out, the system in sending a photo is just it's not supported. Number two is whether or not the hospitals are actually actively looking at that information that comes in. We've had plenty of success with it ourselves. However, on the LA City Fire side, we saw how it was necessarily viewed, and quite frankly, I was even shocked that we've had the success that we've had through it, just in viewing that particular formatting they had.
Bruce?
For Captain Pappas, the database you're talking about, would that work for John and Jane Doe's?
Yes. So we use unknown male or a name is required. So the electronic form will not let you close it and send it to the cloud. And all of the forms are built the same way. They're all proprietary, depending on which. There's digital EMS. There's physio control. There's image trend. So there's several vendors that are in the market, but all of them will not allow you to close the form and send it without a name. So when we don't have a name, it's always unknown male, unknown female, and that's the name that we put in there.
So if I had my son were missing and he's nonverbal, would I be able to call the admin of this particular database and say, he's 5'8", and would people be able to say, well, there's 10 people, unknown males in your region that were, his height and approximate age and stuff like that?
Well, like Mr. Moody, we queried all of the unknown females in that time range for Mr. Moody, and I think we gave you a report of several patients that could have potentially matched his wife, and unfortunately none of them did. But if you ask that fire department, they would be able to query that for you and give you that, to try and narrow it down. Yeah.
And probably the date is a much easier identifier when the person was missing.
Pardon me now?
The date that the person went missing.
Yes, yes.
A couple of questions, Captain Pappas. So for the Orange County model, all county facilities, hospital facilities are required to input into the system?
So there's one electronic medical record. Right. It's actually built on a proprietary system called Image Trend, which is also what the state Emergency Medical Services Authority also uses Image Trend, and it's built on that. And the majority of the counties in California are using Image Trend as well. I'm not advocating for them. I'm a public servant. I'm just saying I've looked at the model. The model's excellent, and it can all talk to each other. What the hospitals in Orange County have done, and Heidi could probably correct me if I'm wrong, that they've all gone to this uniform, but their Department of Health Services has mandated that.
But that's only county facilities, right? What about the
other? All of their facilities have that Image Trend portal, and every single patient care report feeds into that portal.
So there's no private hospital that is not reporting to that
No,
system?
it is something that Orange County Department of Health Services have mandated but we cannot do that now because of the antitrust laws.
There are no county hospitals in Orange County.
I see, okay.
Well, it's a public institution, but you're talking about county hospitals.
There are none? Okay.
It's, UC Irvine is a state institution, but the county has a health agency, and what it does is it contracts out services with the private hospitals.
When did Orange County do that?
I want to say they, when did the Affordable Care Act?
2010?
Oh,
Yes.
so that's a while ago.
Yeah, they were early adopters of the system, and then I think what wound up happening is, as these proprietary technology companies saw that counties were mandating a uniform reporting system, the antitrust laws, they began litigation for antitrust laws. And then we came on after that, and now we're subject to those antitrust laws.
So that would be more of a long-range goal, right?
Captain Pappas, is that to include the convalescent hospitals there in Orange County as well?
No, they don't. I don't know. That would be interesting. I know we are not allowed to transport to a convalescent hospital. So when you call 911 and within the laws, Title 22, that govern pre-hospital care, we can only transport to an approved emergency room facility, 24-hour with an approved doctor. So I don't think Orange County is able to, we can't just transfer to a convalescent home or to an urgent care. So the state of California, that's pre-hospital care, that's governed by Title 22, we have to transport to an emergency room with a physician on duty.
So now, is this database, can it be split up so that there's no PHI, no personal health information?
Right. So when you print out the report, there is a button that you can press and that it will redact basically any patient information on there.
And currently the database does not capture like photos and things of that nature.
No, that's a HIPAA issue. We cannot. We've gone around and around with that. I don't think it's. And maybe Jaime knows better, but we cannot keep a photo of our patient with that patient care record, and we have the capability to do that. We can, but we were always from the beginning. It is not a practice that's used in pre-hospital care. But so, and I don't know if the hospitals take a picture.
Yes.
They do.
I see part of the Cedar sign and they take a picture of you. You have a picture of everyone.
So
It varies widely by hospital.
Just to muddy the waters, I've toured the hospitals in Orange County, San Bernardino, and Riverside County, and I have never gotten a straight story whether they photograph or fingerprint.
I've never been.
I will tell you that in the many instances that we come across that, and Mr. Moody just hit it, it varies with the hospital. Not only just the hospital, but with the social worker we might be dealing with them.
But for the pre-hospital care providers, we cannot do that.
There is one exception. If it's a criminal case, yes, they will photograph it, they will fingerprint, but otherwise, it's dealer's choice.
Well, I think the issue there is, there are hospitals that are willing to have fingerprints conducted. The issue is that there are some law enforcement agencies that only want to run those prints on forensic cases. Nothing else. Anything else that falls outside of that, they don't want to. They don't want to. I've had hospitals that have said, we're willing to run the prints and take them to the department and then have them run. And then there are other issues that come up with it. It'd be great if there were a way, because a lot of this is tapped in through the D&D. Whether there was a mechanism where you can just do it straight. We're trying to maybe see if we can do that fingerprinting via this initiative that the county is working on. It's called the Whole Person Care piece, and see if there's an opportunity to be able to run prints through that process.
But that wouldn't help children.
Sorry?
Right, through the DMV.
Right.
Right, it'd be good.
Unless they have.
Yeah, you're right. Unless they,
Voluntary
yeah,
ID card.
because DMV only has IDs and
Right, and
driver's licenses.
many autistic teens don't drive, or autistic. I mean, that's just a great idea, but I'm just pointing that out.
And will never drive, perhaps.
If I may say, I think what we're saying simply speaks to the complexity of the problem we have. And it's also the solution. One solution may not address the problems we have. The countywide system, that one database system or technology system would have been the idea. Maybe that's a long-term solution. But until we reach that point, what about thinking something, utilizing existing pieces of databases and systems, and maybe designate liaison offices, contact people who would check on their own system and report immediately back to that county-wide system, because the coordination is always important. And we're talking of county-wide system. We have learned again and again that the structures, databases in the county, Los Angeles County, are very wide-ranging, different. They don't integrate, they don't communicate to each other, and it's going to take time and huge cost to even think of updating them, changing them. Sheriff departments is one good example. It's a huge agency, but yet they are using very, very long time, database structure.
Oh yeah.
And
goes way back.
And changing that would require a lot of money and time. But this could be an ideal situation and can be included in the recommendation as a long-term solution. But in the short term, medium term, what do you think? What about designating liaison offices and try to utilize the pieces of database systems, technology, information available in all these agencies, fire department, hospital agencies, and law enforcement agencies, and many others. So, what do you think?
That's a great idea. What do you guys think?
That's a great idea, working in coordination with the lead agency. That might be a first step.
I think it makes me want to move to Orange County.
But I mean, even the Orange County model is not it's comprehensive, but it's not the complete solution, right? I mean, because we're talking about what happens at the point of someone being lost. Well, are we entering data into there about possible, people that may eventually become lost or wander away? There's no prevention in that piece of the database. So I mean, there's really
This all also means someone's been picked up.
exactly.
What if they haven't yet?
Right. Yes. Right,
So that
exactly.
goes back to your missing persons database, which is where that resides, which we know that system doesn't contain pictures or have the capacity to be searched like the Santa Clarita model that was talked about at a previous meeting. So you're right, it's not the whole solution, although it does sound pretty
Definitely a
right.
start. Yes, definitely a start.
I will tell you the last conversation I had with the California Department of Justice is looking at potentially tying in that MUP system with DMV to allow for, CalPhoto, to allow for photographs. So they themselves have recognized that the power behind having that photograph linked to that record, and it is being worked on.
That's good. Adrian, I'd like to make a recommendation. So the 7 months that we have spent, I think we have done an excellent job identifying gaps of service. I think they all need to be included in the report. I know it's cumbersome on you to include them all, but I don't assume that the supervisors are aware of them. I mean, it has taken us 7 months with the expertise of individuals who come in and come out, who offered just golden nuggets of information that we as a group did not know. And so I think that as important a recommendation to the supervisors is to really list all of the gaps that we've also identified, whether it's the database, whether it's policy miscoordination, whether it's timing. So
The gaps and the possible solutions, right? Because I mean, we've also come up with those.
Yes. So we may not be able to resolve all of them, but they need to be aware of it so that if they want to do something about it and designate other committees and task force to look at these other specifics, that they are aware of
I
it.
think there's been so much wisdom shared here. It's been so valuable. What I had done is there's about 7 under each strategy. There were like kind of 7 nuggets that I picked up that I think, in describing them will cover some of those. And then in the appendices, I thought we should put all the brainstorming that was done as well. So I had one of the appendices for the notes that we've taken, because sometimes there's just like a comment or a couple of things that it might be helpful to somebody, and certainly a work group that has more time to continue to address some of the issues. So I wanted to include both. So the things that I put on the handout today, what I thought we could do is if we had the power to sort of make a recommendation that there be an ongoing group and some clarity around that, and then some sort of, I don't know that I like this term low-hanging fruit, but sort of that, like we've been working on things and we have things that are ready to go. So basically, I think I have under each strategy a couple of them and then 3 under the technology. So I can just run through those real quick. Is that okay? All of this is, like when you were talking, Captain, it's like we're on bated breath. It's like every time we learn so much, and it does speak to the complexity. Under the coordination strategies, I have sort of leveraging existing long-term services and supports. I have a McGruff data kit to prepare for missing incidents. So this is bigger. No. So I wanted you to sort of hear the full list, and then I picked 2. So then you'll kind of know, sort of, it's bigger than what's here so far, because it's developing.
We have copies of this if you want to share it with everyone.
Okay, we can do that. We can do it after. You can kind of see what I sort of picked up from each work group. So let me just go with the 2, and then probably I can see people going, wait, I don't have that. Yeah. So under coordination, first responder coordination, enhanced law enforcement checklist. That was included today in your packet, and quite a bit of work has gone on with that. Detective Soto has worked on this, as well as John Gannon, Lieutenant Gannon from Sheriff's, and we have the Highway Patrol as well. So there's 3 checklists that have been looked at, and then things have been added to their own checklist from this group, right? So I think, how do you feel about it? Do you think we're at a pretty good spot? I think we're missing the medical record context for fire, but we're getting pretty close to the final version.
Right. It's a comprehensive list, for sure.
It's comprehensive. And I had mentioned some of the feedback was, it's getting kind of long, and should it be more of a protocol? And I guess the law enforcement model that I heard from sheriffs was, we're used to that. We want to be sure that we just hit off everything, and we're used to paper in the field, and also they felt like this was the model that they used, that they want to kind of hang with at this point, and that it certainly brings one step forward. So I just give you that feedback. I think that would have been shared if John was here. Okay, so I feel like that's kind of something that we can hang our hat on, in the sense that there's been a lot of education here about what can be included, and I don't think I'll spend time here. So do take a look at this. I think we can all train to it. We can all learn from it. There may be pieces that are not clear, so be learning where do you have some missing information that will help enhance. So that's sort of one of the takeaways that I thought we could put in our report, along with a hospital coordination checklist. So I know that the county hospital social workers have agreed to meet on Halloween. If anyone is wanting to, you're welcome to do it. At 2 o'clock at the main county hospital, we're going to have a meeting. There's a couple of directors that have checklists, and they train their staff to them, and they've agreed to work together to put them together and to talk what's missing. We're going to have Molly Davies from Ombudsman there, and others are welcome to join as well. So just let me know if you think that that's something you'd like to speak into. And I know, Mr. Garcia, you at the Hospital Association have done another initiative similar to this, or been thinking about it?
So one of the things, what I've been looking at is the issue of policy within hospitals relative to John and Jane Doe's, and actually many of the hospitals actually have policies around unrepresented individuals. So that's really the kind of the catch-all, and outlines what they're supposed to be doing. Whether those individuals who are unable to communicate, those individuals that are incapable, that they set up a bioethics team that comprises a physician who then looks at delivering care. What are those medical decisions that need to be made in the event that they cannot find family members that can be kind of like their executor in many respects. So that's really kind of the thing. And so when I did hear back from some of the hospitals that have said that they are going to go look at developing a policy that is specific to John and Jane Does, in addition to keeping this policy that we have right now in place in terms of the unrepresented individuals. So that's kind of where we're at least I should say I'm at with it. And those policies that I heard from some of the hospitals that they are going to be developing, I have not seen that final draft yet. But once that's available, I'm happy to share that with you.
Could it funnel back to the group? Yeah. Do you feel comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Because I think Mr. Moody, you kind of began the process, right? Kind of informing and about the need for this.
Well, I met with HASC, but I'm sure they were working on something like this before.
So it's kind of interesting to think, you've been such a catalyst in so many areas in this county. So,
is there an agency that handles missing birth, like unknown males and females? Is there if like all the hospitals, if a hospital gets someone in that is unidentified, could there be one clearinghouse where that information goes to a new agency or an existing one that handles unknown people, so that my son's missing, I call up hospitals in the area from the list or whatever, and nobody knows him by name, and they say, okay, now you need to call up the this number, which is for unknown people. All the hospitals and police departments notify this organization when there's someone that's not known.
It's kind of back to more the ombudsman kind of model, right?
Well, it sort of splits it though, because people are either known or unknown. So this would only be for people that are unknown.
They don't contact law enforcement. Hospitals don't.
Yes, they do.
Yeah,
Okay.
they do. The other thing I heard that they go into the community in terms of looking at skilled nursing facilities or other types of boarding care facilities to see whether they had that individual at their facility in an effort to kind of identify them, or they go to the senior centers. Also, is what I've been told by the facilities as part of their kind of their outreach. So they the social worker tends to kind of try to hit it from different perspectives, and obviously there are instances where they're unable to kind of find family or try to create that reunification.
But they're required to report it at minimum to law
Yeah, they do
enforcement?
reach out to law enforcement.
Share this. When my son went missing in his worst incident, when I called 911, the dispatcher said to me, actually on the phone, that does match the description of a juvenile that we picked up, but we don't know which hospital he's been brought to. And then the cops came to my house, the LAPD came, and we had to wait 25 minutes. Nobody knew where he was. He had been picked up by fire department and then PD. And they said, we don't know, we can't reach anybody. So he was, we weren't 100% sure that it was my son, but there were 25 minutes where nobody could reach anybody. And they said at the time, well, it's probably because they're not getting cell reception wherever they are at the hospital, because he's been brought through into emergency because he was found without his clothes. That's just sort of an FYI, that there was this time that was extremely precious and difficult, where nobody knew where he was, but we were pretty sure it was him. So they gave two different names of hospitals, and we finally found that it was Huntington. So,
as a parent in a similar situation, I feel terrified during those 25 minutes, but I need that. If I could find out that someone was found and it took only a half hour to find out where they are and stuff, it would be hideous while you're going through it. But you get that information within a half hour compared to not getting it at all.
When I'm thinking about what we were learning about the database that the fire has too, like maybe that law enforcement, did they know of that database?
That's right.
Did they get to
I think it is a matter of people not having the information or knowing what resources we already have in place.
Wonderful. It's I see two phases, but I think there's so much just to get everybody to understand the current rules and the current systems and the current places to look.
Maybe that's where training becomes important, all these key agencies, first responders, so that they know what to do.
And families.
Yeah.
So thanks you guys for, you're letting us sort of kind of mull through this agenda here, but we are covering the things that we want to cover, which is, I think, you know, if there's any last words, just going back to finish up the consortium piece, is there anything that you, I think, you know, we'll take into consideration the input here. I think anything more on lead agency, I just want to go back to that. If, you know, if we had sort of trained up experts in this that could be more involved in the day-to-day urgent cases, maybe they, like Viviana was saying, they'd be part of a lead agency, and who should that be? Any suggestions? That feels very political, but I just feel like I got to put it to you all, because I don't know.
It feels like it should be law enforcement. Because they're at the center of this issue, right? So much is flowing through them.
And I've kind of gotten the sense from law enforcement that, don't give us one
I
more
know,
goal,
exactly.
You know?
I hear that really clearly. So that's
Well, and on the community side, how realistic is it that they're going to go to law enforcement?
I guess I was seeing them though not as the community interface, but as the agency coordinator. Do you know what I mean?
No, I hear you, but in order for those reports to even get there, will families report?
But that's what they're doing now is 911, right? Yes. That's what we've all been trained to do, and 911 connects into these official fire and or police systems.
Right.
But all the stuff before the person goes missing would be outside of law enforcement right now, right? So, you know, maybe DPSS would be maybe that's too broad, but something like that might be a better coordinator. And then even with law enforcement, by the way, the question is which law enforcement, right?
Yeah, I know.
Or supervisor says the county, at their disposal, if they really don't have LAPD, right? They can ask. That's what.
I just have a question. You know, when you're mentioning DCFS, would there be any issues?
DCFS.
Not
DCFS. They're not going to call us. Excuse us.
Well, in regards, you know, if you look at a government department agency, are there issues around confidentiality in terms of posting any type of information that you'd have to kind of be concerned of? Because, yeah, at least for me, I'm kind of thinking it'd be great that, you know, you can have a kind of centralized repository kind of where you can kind of do a search, but is there any type of prohibition in terms of posting type of, you know, information, particularly now that we're talking about minors?
Well, and I'm thinking if it were generated by the family, right? If the family...
If it's volunteer, right?
Oh, the family
they click some type of consent form saying that consent.
And they could send a photo of their loved one to X agency or website.
So we already do that, right? We have the medical, or you put all that information in there, right? So you're releasing it to them at a minimum. So putting that out to a government agency would be fine too. I think you'd probably get pretty widespread.
Well, the medical alert, I think, you know, if someone is found, you know, then they, I guess the way it works is that the medical alert is called, so that's the caregiver or the family calling that. But if it's a database of a lot of missing people that people can go in and see, then predators can use that too. They could kidnap somebody and say, I have this.
Sorry, you're right. I wasn't making that distinction. Right. Right. That's a good point.
Now, having worked with medical records in an accounting, I know that there is ways that you can authorize people to input data, not to look at data.
Right.
And at the other end, you still need to make sure that only certain individuals have access to the total database. So it's nothing like free for all.
Right.
So I know that whoever understands these systems, we know where the securities that need to be put in place. But going back to the issue of the lead agency and who needs to be the lead agency, we need to make sure that whoever is that lead agency has a very close interest at heart about this issue. At the same time, needs to have some distance from the provision of the services. Yeah. We want to make sure that whoever is monitoring or who is responsible is watching the whole thing. It might be a conflict of interest to be too close, doing the job and at the same time coordinating the effort. So we need to be looking at someone kind of a neutral role. That's my...
If I can just tag on what you're saying is that when SNAP was in place, it was a voluntary for information we put in, but it was only accessible to sheriff's department or whomever when the need was there. It was only if there was a need to know. So there are mechanisms by which you make sure things are very confidential. But the other part you're saying too is that because I'm involved very much with the emergency preparedness part of the county. For instance, you don't think about Parks and Recreation as being a part of the emergency response, but in a sense they're far enough away so that they're not being the first responders. So Parks and Recs become very much involved, or even the library with, let's say, the response part and providing people help during the recovery period because the first responders are doing other jobs. So I like your concept that it has to be somebody probably away from the sheriffs. My main concern is it's got to be an umbrella that's large enough to go over the entire county. So, because like you even say it's sheriffs. Well, sheriffs is not LA City. It's not the other 44 organizations. So we got to look at the potential for an organization that goes across the entire county.
When that has the resources to really absorb
they have to get the
responsibility.
They have to get the funds.
What about Medi-Cal?
That's insurance, huh?
Yeah. But they do a lot of stuff. My son gets all his therapies and stuff through them now, and it's good. You know, the thing for people with developmental disabilities is really run very well. You know, the vendors and everything go through there, and you know,
They have bureaus and things like that within them, but it's a little different. I think.
Who oversees Medi-Cal? What's the
State.
California?
Yeah.
But locally?
The Department of Healthcare Services.
And all the vendors do not have Medi-Cal.
No, right. But we're trying to identify the umbrella agency. Department of Healthcare Services.
Molly, you've been trying to get in there, huh?
Oh, I was just going to say, in terms of placement, what about WEDAX?
I'm wondering.
I said, what about a WEDAX? Sorry.
How about you, creature?
Sorry.
Yeah.
We're still friends.
That's fine. Sure. No.
But because you have the other ombudsman program, right? That works with sheriffs, right?
Actually,
or is that moved?
No, that's been moved.
Oh, it's been moved. Oh, okay.
I think that.
Or wherever that one is.
What that is, aging.
But
you do aging.
it is, yeah. It is under consideration. I know that Cynthia's been discussing this internally with executives, and also I know she's been reaching out to, I think it was OEM, as well as I think her next reach out was to sheriffs and LAPD. So, but yeah, APS is a consideration. Although we don't. The other part of this population we're talking about is autistic population,
I wasn't saying APS. I was saying
just WEDAX in general.
I was going to suggest maybe mental health or health services as a department to be maybe the overseer because of the population that would probably end up in the situation of either being lost or missing. So it would make sense.
Where in your system does it fit? Because I feel like I'm a little ignorant about how everything works. I can be the naive one here in the room.
Well, it's my understanding that both departments are a rather large department with viable infrastructures already that they might, I don't know if anyone on the task force has already reached out to them to see what type of services.
She does not. Likely to be able to answer that question because our section, I'm with the Public Guardians Office, we're a very small section of the Department of Mental Health.
The TMH has always been actively participating in this task force.
Yes.
And so TCFS, right?
What about public health?
Well, public health is being focused on policy, and program implementation, but it's something that will need to be discussed with the department. On the other hand, I like your idea about health services. It's overarching, right? It brings several departments, including mental health and
Or you're talking about the health agency?
The health agency. The health agency.
DMH or DHS.
Right. But then what would you do in situations where you don't, not all individuals access their care through health services? And for that matter, I think the DMH.
I thought the health service, it's the health service or health agency that has
Well, you have the health
hospitals and
agency, you have the health agency, underneath the health agency, you have health services, public health, and then
Okay.
PH, right? Yeah, PHS.
I mean, they would be thinking of a lead, who would like
Yes.
make sure we get
Right.
together and that we're
Oh,
working
I
on
see.
these things.
Yes,
I
that's
thought,
what we're
in
thinking.
terms of collecting information.
No, it would be this consortium, right?
Yeah,
Where
that's
does
the
Who
consortium.
leads the
I
consortium?
took this back, I'm sorry.
And for that reason, I would support public health, because under the Department of Health, even though they have the infrastructure's focus is in the hospital service. Whereas public health has a broader scope of what they do, and it gets out to the community. It's part of that. That's part of their focus, and at least from my experience on the other end, I'm also a mental health provider, but at a community forums, who brings us together is public health, actually.
So is contacting Dr. Barbara
Yeah.
Ferreira about this and having that conversation with her to see what she thinks,
She was originally. She was came to the first
Does it
meeting.
track unidentified folks that are in facilities, is that right?
No,
I don't think so.
The work is policy, is research. There are some nurses that go into the community and
I
do
know that,
education and things like that.
But that makes it a good argument for getting the.
But now that they're technically under all three departments or under one umbrella, they should be giving you access to all of that information. And public health has the staffing with the skill level that can do data.
Oh, yes, they do
Whereas-
wonderful
Whereas the
before
health,
follow-up.
whereas the health department doesn't do that. They're known for that, and they produce reports to the community.
And they're
Yeah,
great
so-
with, as you said, with outreach and
Yes, they do that.
PSAs and.
I think you need to talk to.
Are you a 20% operation? Any of your?
No, so you need to talk, but that 24/7 piece, if this is vehicle, it's
Yeah.
very easy to feel with a partner agency that is open 24/7. That is, what we're looking is at the bigger picture. So, identify your key agencies, I think, is interviewing to see what they offer. I will say that whether they are interested or not, in my opinion, is irrelevant.
Right.
Because the board supervisor makes decisions here. So think about that.
I think this task force would need to make the recommendation.
Right.
And then the board would have to take a decision on it and determine which, based on the recommendations that are offered. which
So
would
what
be
what I'm saying here is that I heard you say that public health could be a good possibility.
Maybe we should take
and
an
you will.
unofficial vote.
And Viviana say yes, right? I was here was trying to put it on you, but.
Makes a lot of sense.
And I, like I said, I only support that, even though I'm on the mental health side. As mental health, we've done a lot of outreach, but it's a lot more focused on mental health and in health services. Whereas my experience with public health, it can be more. They are able to be broad.
I think our goal would be to protect, the bigger core primary thing is to keep people from going missing.
Yes,
we want to save
yes.
people's
It's
time, energy,
prevention.
and the risk of getting harmed,
Right.
So that, I like that piece, the prevention is such a big piece of it. I could almost in my mind see like 3 core agencies, that have to work together. Because again, I'm kind of thinking of the conceptual model, but you do have such a key piece with, law enforcement and health. Sort of.
Each one playing a different role. The one thing you need to think is about the coordination that we are lacking. And the more people you put in the middle, the more difficult it becomes. So streamline the process, use your consortium, and then move the creativity.
See, she's got the plan, she's got
All
the...
right,
Very good.
we'll have Cynthia call Barbara.
I will.
Vivian's, Viviana said,
There you go.
You know, my thinking about sort of our initial recommendation with technology was that we, Solomon has kind of headed up a nice listing. So that was our early work where we really collected and through surveys and asking vendors to come talk to us and all. We have a really nice list. So we want to be inclusive of that list. And I think we've learned, you know, the importance of layering different types of technology and sort of how to coordinate and organize it so that when you're educating, you know, folks out there that they can kind of know there's registries, they can know there's GPS and radio frequency and kind of just having a little bit sense. And then there's all these alert systems, and so you know, people can participate in those using social media and all of that. So there, I think there's sort of about 4 areas that you have kind of helped us organize. And when I go see the social workers on Halloween, I want to take on the list too. You know, just I think begin to, let's just keep educating, you know, I think that this is really valuable, you know, as part of training. So that's our sort of creative thing, and Bruce is on there, yeah.
If we could do the, really, and maybe this needs to be 2 stages, the report. Well, on the technology part, if you could get something in place that, you know, doesn't cost a lot or whatever, it could, you know, sort of as quickly as possible, as an urgent thing, then you know the which agency does what and all that can happen, because that could take years and years. You know, figuring out which agency, creating new overriding databases. You know, so if there's one thing is it's a crisis, we need to have a technology that helps people get home immediately, and on the mid to long term, we need to have an infrastructure that supports this and supports all the agencies and pulls it together, however you want to word that.
I like that idea. I think it's simple, one application, everybody use it one way. And the information goes.
Or 2 applications, you know, because I mean, there's, you know, some people have different preferences, you know, so, you know, it doesn't have to be one technology, but it needs to be simple and maybe a couple of options.
And I think we've really, you know, as we've looked at that, we've gone back to sort of making sure people know the menu, you know. I think there are certain agencies and leaders here that tend to go to certain, you know, technology first. And so I feel like, you know, just getting registered or getting a device. I just came from a meeting with Susan Carr, and she has her medical alert on. Her husband has the Project Lifesaver bracelet, and she has her Gizmo app set up on her phone, and she can show me, oh, look, he's at Descanso Gardens right now. Yeah, it's like, wow. So, I mean, she had to learn that the hard way, you know. He's been missing seriously 3 times, you know. But I think that layering, I think people giggle that somebody's using more than one technology, but I think that's what we've learned. There's like, none of them are going to be the sole answer. And I think that we learned that early on and didn't want to hear it.
It's principle in emergency management, for example. You always have to have redundancies.
Redundancies.
You have to have high-tech, low-tech, everything in between.
That's a good
You always
term.
have to have redundancies in systems.
And maybe because I'm a technical person, you know, while realizing they have to be overlapping technical solutions, it seems way more easy to me to get that in place than, you know, which government agency that already bought their database and doesn't want to use somebody else's database is going to take over all the other ones for this thing. I mean, it seems like one huge, you know, thing for people to work on over time compared to like a smaller thing.
I don't know if it's smaller. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just to me, because I'm technical.
It is technical. We have had IT at WEDAC's looking at how to integrate existing databases, and so there might be some.
Yeah, we may have some more information. We're consulting with
we just got something today, so we want to read it.
developers to look into all these technologies, devices, and database systems, how they can be integrated and put to use to.
That was recommended. Oh, she left, but. It was recommended by one of you that we make sure an IT expert was looking at this, so we've done that.
Right. So with technologies, I think the solutions seems to be coming up. Project Lifesaver was one good example. We had presentations from the police department, and we knew the shortcomings, the advantages of that. That can be scaled up to the countywide system easily, and the sheriff department is doing a great job on that. Lieutenant Gannon particularly, he's been doing a job collecting information. That's just one of the technologies. As we discussed many times, one technology is not going to provide a solution for everything. So we may have to come up with a menu of technologies, making sure the core important technologies are there. And it's going
I want to piggyback on that, we do have a proposal from Project Lifesaver to LA Sheriffs with some dollars and kind of what it would take.
Right.
And they're willing to be trained and to use 2 of their helicopters. They actually, the pilots have agreed to get the training. And so there's been a lot of good work. And what that would do is that then as a county, we would be able to use Project Lifesaver. Individual cities wouldn't have to go and enroll with a large cost. So it would be cost saving. We'd have the ability to do right now search and rescue across the county if somebody happened to have that. Right now, that's too small a number that have it, and there's barriers to paying for that initial thing.
And again, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
it's getting the word out, and it's the community outreach pieces. You can have the best system in place, and it's shiny and new, and it's great. But if the community doesn't know about it,
it's
been a challenge in Glendale, getting people to learn about it and be open to it.
Can't imagine the challenge in LA then, Glendale is so small.
So I think it's a great, I think it enhances LA County being able to, use it across the county. Then people can, without their city buying into it, they can tap into it and know that it would be something that could help them find their loved one. So it gives us, I think, a nice sort of way to leverage that whole program. But I like what you were saying, Solomon. It's just one of the menu. So that's sort of that. We have the listing of registries and trackers and alert systems and a proposal that could make Project Lifesaver countywide to be a support. Yes.
Can we recommend that the board put money forward to help make it more accessible to folks who couldn't afford to pay for it on their own?
With the Project Lifesaver?
Yes.
Okay,
I wasn't sure. I guess it was.
And I almost thought it might take, some power of this consortium to push that through. I don't know if they would just vote for that. But I think you and I were talking about how there are a lot of agencies that have purchase of serviceability too. So getting them trained up, that, if you have a couple that keep going missing.
And that's why we really have.
We would do it.
So we really have to.
Devices.
And that could lead into a whole system of services and education for regional center clients.
Right.
When you're dealing with juveniles and those with autism and developmental disabilities. So it could sort of open up the door for each coordinator, like, hey, we have this service and let's discuss wandering, and has your child ever wandered, and so forth.
And the budget seems like not, it would be for the whole menu, because regional centers, they have certain budgets, they have certain things they like to talk about, and so everybody's different.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's really critical that we still need to determine what is the prevalence of the issue, of the problem. Before we even talk about, a budget, what are we going to recommend to the board in terms of, how many people we're going to try to assist? Are we talking about the highest risk individuals? Can we as a team identify the highest risk individuals? Those are the things that we need to kind of consider as we, push forward with this recommendation.
Like behaviors could be well managed by somebody, and one family may have a really great approach, where another family doesn't have that much support, or, I feel like there's so many variables, that it does make it hard to know.
Well, it's far beyond the government, right? So it's Barbara's organizations, and people are going to interact with those long before they call the county. Depending on lots of different things, they might call the county first, right? The Medi-Cal might get them first or something, but there's a whole bunch of different groups that might encounter them. The outreach to those groups is going to be critical, right, for anything that we come up with here.
Yes.
Before I got here, did you guys talk about mental evaluation teams?
Yes. Did we? No.
I think that could be a natural place to look, just because the board is really excited about them. And it does sit at the intersection of public health and criminal justice. So I think it's worth looking at.
Is this like the Hope team or like those kinds of
Smart,
models?
Smart team and
so many acronyms.
Yeah. I think there's LASD and DMH have a program. I think it's either Smart or is it Smart? Okay, and LAPD has one as well. It's
that's
MET.
Smart.
Is it MET? Okay, so it's opposite. MET is LASD and Smart is LAPD. That was so yeah, that's something to look into.
Okay. And so the thinking with that was, like maybe as far as the lead agency piece, or?
Well, I know they're not an agency, but it does seem like they're already in that area, that region.
This is their work.
They're first responders, and yeah.
So they have a role. That is a consortium.
No.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking, this may be great in terms of, the first response issue,
Right.
but not in terms of consortium.
Organization.
From my
Right.
perspective, yeah.
Right, and that's what we're talking about. There's maybe two leads that we're talking about.
And another thing that we need to be looking is the point of entry, the prevention piece. At one point we discussed physicians identifying individuals at risk. So that's an entry point. Then once a person is in the system, has been lost once or twice, how we are attentively watching, so it's monitoring. So it's several things that we need to be looking so we can develop strategies across a continuum to be able to address the issue. So
Can physicians get trained about the best dementia care protocol? Do you know? I wonder if it's in there at all.
No.
Anything about watering?
No, there are California state guidelines, best practices, but I would not call that widespread as far as adoption and practice. It's a system that doesn't give people a lot of time to spend with an individual patient, and so I think it's not that there's lack of goodwill. It doesn't happen. Best practice doesn't happen.
yeah, so some advocacy needs to be done about expected practice and guidelines, so that can be incorporated. If the person is identified at risk, what do you do? In addition to doing the diagnosis, you need to educate the family member.
We have huge issues with diagnosis because most people don't get a diagnosis of dementia, and even those that get a diagnosis, sometimes they don't even tell the family member the diagnosis. So we have issues that are even further upstream. And even when we're talking about a situation where someone has been assessed appropriately and given a diagnosis, they still don't get this kind of information. I think it would be extremely rare that a physician or anyone in that office would ever talk with a family about the potential of wandering after they've given that diagnosis. I bet it never happens.
Okay, so that's an area to target.
Well, and just having that pamphlet, having that paper to hand to them. I think about the diagnosis process and all the things going through that with my son, and the stack of pamphlets that we got, and just create. You were talking about that. Like, it's just easy to just hand the paper, and for the harried physician who's got no time and is stretched thin, like they've got this little resource, and and there would be a section in there on the risks of wandering, and here are your resources. It could be this long, but that could really help.
And that's really critical, because how are you going to say to ask a family if someone's at risk? Because a lot of people I know that that are somewhat in their situation is to leave it. Like the day before somebody leaves, you say, "Oh well, are they at wandering risk?" And a lot of families say, "Oh no, they never do that."
Right.
But they're changing.
But this would be something that would be handed to them at the time of the diagnosis or treatment, so they'd have it in a little folder on their desk, right? So then the incident occurs, and
so we've worked on that, and part of our challenges is how fragmented our healthcare system is. Where's the entry point at which you go to make that widespread?
Of course.
Well,
And that's, we can fix that at the next meeting.
Yeah, exactly. I'd like to. Personal passion.
So on the last community outreach piece, we wanted to say that sort of the easier, the ready things that we could work on would be like a campaign to increase awareness, building on existing events, media, materials. So all of us are doing education, the roll calls and different things that we would use all these different avenues to be kind of pushing out the information. And then also there was the wandering guide that McGruff had provided us, and we thought that's kind of easy. We could tailor that to our county. We have some pricing on that already. So that would be a piece that different agencies, we could get that in maybe the WEDEX hands or somebody's, so that it goes out to health fairs and things like that as a part of that. Does that sound okay to people? Yeah. So those would be sort of like the two that, we're ready to go right now. We have, this checklist we can start educating about. We have things that we can, wrap up with our task force that we can start to use.
That would be great, because if like every doctor's office has like a little stack of that. Here's our stack for people with autism. Here's our stack for people with dementia. Whatever. And so the doctor sees it and sees someone and says, I think he might have autism. You should go get a diagnosis from a specialist. And just in case he does, he could be a wandering risk. Here's a little booklet that gives you some tips to do, so that he might be safer while you find out if there's an issue.
And it is really hard to expect doctors to do that on the other hand, because they are just totally overwhelmed. And,
but if it's at the office as a
I love the
staff.
idea of a pamphlet.
And I actually got pricing on taking out the little strip that does the fingerprinting, because that adds a lot to the cost. And from what I was learning from some people in law enforcement, it doesn't sound like the quality of the print would be very good. What do you guys think about that?
You could still make the suggestion, as one of the suggestions, go to your local police station, because I know at different health fairs, they do have the kits for children.
Yes. Well, this is that kind of a kit.
Right.
You we can leave it in and have some with that.
No, what she's suggesting is you put in a suggestion to go to the local police and get fingerprinted.
These are the resources
They do. And the quality of the
right.
What do you think?
So
Is that
not as expensive?
We're getting away from actually doing that. There are more private venues that are offering it now.
Like live scans?
The reason being is we at the police department, LAPD, we live scan. And so we've gotten away from fingerprint cards.
But provide that as a resource, saying there's other ways of scanning, or even the picture. That is critical.
Oh, it has that. It has the photo. It has a fingernail for DNA testing. It has a few things that are easy to do. And they don't cost much in the booklet.
That session. That sounds amazing.
I have it in the car. So it's all kind of there, and I think it does get you thinking that, whoa, I need to be aware of how this would go if something bad happened.
Let me just say that, because we used to suggest to families, and families told us that they actually went to the local sheriff's department office in order to do the fingerprint. So if that's not happening on a regular basis, I know LiveScan costs at least about $70 or more. So that would be very cost prohibitive for most families. So maybe we would go back to the possibility of, like you say, with or without. But maybe, like you said, if you wanted to cut your cost, at least some of them would just say there are other options in order to have LiveScan or other options for fingerprinting.
It seems like the picture would be, a lot of people are going to be like, I'm going to the police station to get my son fingerprinted. And I think people would be much more open to getting, parents, getting a picture.
Yeah.
I'd be okay with both, but, especially when we go in and we service a lot of people that don't speak English and get no services of any kind other than, us.
And I just want to remind people, I learned from Carol that a lot of the regional centers have electronic photos of all their consumers. That's thousands of photos. If you know their regional center client, there's probably a photo that you can get. So
I'd like to ask if we're looking to purchase. If we're looking to purchase a booklet like this, make sure that the booklet is also available for us to have as a PDF, so that the key agencies can post it. I know Wise and Health Aging has a wonderful elder abuse directory, so even if you can't have it in your hand, you know, you could go ahead and download it off the website.
Yeah.
So you want to have
That has been
access,
addressed in
permission.
the proposal, yeah, so that's good, I'm glad you got that.
I love the pamphlet idea because that is something even caregivers could share with the neighbors, and they will feel they're ratting out the caregiver, but more this is a number, and even when they make that call for the purpose of wanderers, then that already alerts law enforcement as this is that kind of case.
If we could tailor it, they will provide it in English and Spanish, and if you need it in another language, like I was just thinking of, like, wouldn't it be great that a Korean church or something took it on to have some in Korean, or, you know, like, you could actually, they have a fee to do the translation, but they would also get it out there.
It can also be used as outreach and, you know, the education program activities. With us, for example, we do a lot of outreach activities, and we would be happy to distribute this outreach.
But if one parent takes it and
Yes.
then they'll want to share it with
Would be
someone else and
distributed.
say, you know what, check the website, you can go ahead and download it.
Yeah.
You don't have to go and search out.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, I know you're all so busy. Oh, and you're so informative. I mean, we've had a really good discussion. It's a lot. So the goal, I'm going to be sitting a lot with this guy right here and this guy right here, because we're working hard to get something together that you feel comfortable going forward with. You know, we are hopeful that we'll have something fairly close at our next meeting, which is November 15th. I wanted to just give a couple minutes if there's any public comments that people wanted to make, anything that didn't get said that you'd like to make. You got brown air. Okay, anything you want to add? Okay, so we don't know about the room yet for the 15th, but we'll be in touch with you. So
Today was a record. We got to the first room and we stayed here.
Yeah, don't take us a few months, but we're there. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. We'll be in touch.